War cinema shows us the best and the worst of human nature. Stories of courage, sacrifice, madness, and despair. Films that do not only depict battles, but make us feel as if we were there, facing the horror of war. These are the 10 best war movies of all time. The Bridge on the River Kwai is not just a war film. It is a brutal clash between pride, discipline, and madness. Deep in the jungle, British prisoners are forced to build a bridge for the Japanese army, and what should have been a humiliation becomes a sick obsession. Colonel Nicholson, masterfully played by Alec Guinness, sees the project not as a defeat, but as an opportunity to prove the superiority of his men, even if that means collaborating with the enemy. That contradiction turns the story into a moral time bomb that explodes with one of cinema's most iconic endings. Lean depicts war not as an open battlefield, but as a psychological hell where the true battle is fought inside each man. The Bridge on the River Kwai remains a warning of how pride can destroy just as much as war itself. Come and See is not just a war movie, it is a filmed nightmare. Elem Klimov drags us into Nazi-occupied Belarus and forces us to live the massacre through the eyes of a child, Floria. What begins with the innocence of a teenager dreaming of joining the resistance quickly becomes a descent into absolute hell. As the story advances, the boy's face, brought to life by Alexei Kravchenko in an unforgettable performance, ages before our eyes, carved by horror and despair. Klimov does not portray war as strategy or heroism, but as pure barbarity. Villages burned, families exterminated, nature itself turned into a stage of madness. His camera clings to the boy's face until we feel trapped in the same nightmare, unable to escape. Come and See is cinema that hurts, cinema that wounds, and cinema that stays forever in the memory. Many consider it the hardest film ever made about war because it strips humanity bare to reveal the worst of its essence. It is not entertainment. It is a necessary experience, a scream reminding us of what we are capable of when hatred takes over the world. Das Boot locks us inside a German submarine during the Second World War, where a young and frightened crew spends weeks underwater on a suicide mission. The sea becomes both prison and enemy. Above them wait the Allied destroyers. Below lies only an infinite abyss. The film makes us endure the unbearable tension of every maneuver, every torpedo fired, and every deadly silence in the darkness. Every drip from the hull, every metallic creak is a promise of death. But the most powerful aspect is how it shows these men trapped. They laugh, sing, joke, and dream of returning home until claustrophobia and fear consume them. Wolfgang Petersen's camera never lets us escape that suffocating atmosphere for a second. We feel the stale air, the sweat, the lack of space, the paranoia growing with each dive. What begins as a military mission becomes a psychological journey to the edge of collapse. There are no glorious battles or heroic speeches, only the raw struggle to survive inside a steel coffin that threatens to become a collective grave. Das Boot is not a typical war film. It is a descent into the depths of the ocean and into the darkest shadows of the human soul. The Deer Hunter is one of the most devastating films ever made about the effect of war on everyday life. Michael Cimino depicts a group of friends from a small working-class town in Pennsylvania who enjoy hunting, weddings, and parties until the army drags them into the hell of Vietnam. What begins as a warm portrait of friendship and community becomes a nightmare where violence and trauma destroy everything they love. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, and Meryl Streep deliver unforgettable performances in a story that shows how war does not end on the battlefield. It continues in the invisible scars soldiers bring home. Some of its scenes are already legendary, like the Russian roulette sequence, one of the most intense moments in cinema history. The Deer Hunter does not speak of heroes or victories. It speaks of irreparable losses, broken friendships, and the impossibility of ever being the same after witnessing horror. A painful and profoundly human masterpiece that proves war always exacts its price, even far from the front. The Thin Red Line is the most poetic and profound war film ever made. Terrence Malick takes us to the island of Guadalcanal during the Second World War, not just to show us the battle, but to immerse us in the gaze of the men who live it. The story follows a group of American soldiers facing the Japanese army in a natural paradise turned into hell. Malick films war as a constant contrast, the beauty of nature against the brutality of man, the desire to survive against the certainty of death. Among the trenches and assaults, each character becomes a reflection of what it means to be alive when everything around you collapses. The cast is immense. Sean Penn, Jim Caviezel, Nick Nolte, Elias Koteas, and all convey that mix of fear, rage, and wonder. But what makes The Thin Red Line unique is its ability to stop time. The camera caresses trees, animals, wounded faces, as if war were only an accident in an eternal world. More than a war movie, it is a visual poem about the fragility of existence. Full Metal Jacket is the most surgical and disturbing vision ever made of the Vietnam War. Stanley Kubrick divides the film into two devastating halves. The first locks us inside a training camp where a group of young recruits are stripped of their humanity by Sergeant Hartman, a verbal monster who humiliates, molds, and turns them into killing machines. The tension between Private Pyle and his sergeant culminates in one of the most shocking scenes in cinema history. The second half takes us straight into the chaos of Vietnam, where those same young men, now soldiers, face violence and madness in an environment where nothing makes sense. There we follow Joker, a military journalist trying to preserve his humanity while war devours everything. With cold, calculated, and brutal staging, Kubrick shows how war destroys not only bodies, but also minds. There is no heroism, no glory, only alienation, death, and the echo of children's songs amid the horror. Full Metal Jacket is an experience that disarms the viewer, revealing that in war, the true battlefield is the mind. Platoon is one of the most brutal and honest war films ever shot, because it comes directly from the experience of its director, Oliver Stone, who fought in Vietnam. The story follows Chris Taylor, an idealistic young man played by Charlie Sheen, who enlists convinced he is fighting for a just cause, but soon discovers the real battle is not only against the enemy, but within his own unit. Amid suffocating jungle, ambushes, and constant fear, the platoon is divided into two opposing figures: Sergeant Elias, compassionate and humane, and Sergeant Barnes, cruel and merciless. That confrontation becomes the moral core of the film, a struggle between light and darkness within the same army. Stone shows the real Vietnam, chaotic, confusing, marked by exhaustion, paranoia, and the atrocities committed by soldiers as much as suffered by them. Platoon won the Oscar for Best Picture, but beyond awards, it is a visceral testimony of what it means to lose innocence in the middle of hell. A work that reminds us war not only destroys countries, it destroys the souls of those who fight it.
Aim! Fire!
Paths of Glory is one of the most powerful denunciations ever made against the senselessness of war. Stanley Kubrick sets the story in the First World War, where the French army orders a suicidal attack on German trenches. The soldiers, exhausted and aware it is impossible, hesitate to go forward, and the response of their superiors is merciless. Randomly select 3 men and condemn them to death for cowardice. Colonel Dax, played with great force by Kirk Douglas, becomes the only defender of those soldiers in a military trial whose outcome is already decided. The film combines the rawness of the trenches with the coldness of aristocratic halls, where corrupt and arrogant generals play with human lives like chess pieces. Kubrick films with surgical precision, showing war as an absurd machine in which the men below die, while those above preserve their pride. Paths of Glory does not need massive battles to be overwhelming. Injustice, helplessness, and human pain are enough. A masterpiece that not only portrays the First World War, but also exposes the eternal face of power and injustice. Saving Private Ryan revolutionized cinema forever. It begins with one of the greatest scenes in film history, the Normandy landing, where Steven Spielberg throws us into the heart of hell with a realism never seen before. The chaos, the screams, the blood, the sand turned red. But after that devastating beginning, the film tells a profoundly human story. A group of soldiers led by Captain Miller, masterfully played by Tom Hanks, must enter enemy territory to find and rescue Private James Ryan, the last surviving son of a family that has already lost all the others in the war. What begins as an almost absurd mission becomes a reflection on sacrifice, brotherhood, and the price of life. Each member of the squad carries his own voice, doubts, and fears, and through them, the film shows that war is not just battles, but moral choices that leave permanent scars. Saving Private Ryan does not glorify, does not embellish. It makes us feel the mud, the despair, and the weight of death. It is a journey that redefines the word heroism, because in war, there are no clean victories, only impossible sacrifices. Apocalypse Now is the absolute pinnacle of war cinema, a film that does not merely depict war, but transforms it into a hallucinatory, unforgettable experience. Francis Ford Coppola turns the Vietnam conflict into a descent into the deepest madness, following Captain Willard, Martin Sheen, on a suicidal mission to enter the jungle and find Colonel Kurtz, an officer who has abandoned all discipline and become a near mythical figure of horror. The journey upriver is also a journey into the darkness of the human soul, with legendary scenes, helicopters attacking to the sound of Wagner, villages reduced to ashes, soldiers consumed by delirium. And at the core, Marlon Brando as Kurtz, embodying the monster that war itself has created. Coppola films as if cinema itself were at stake, mixing spectacle, poetry, and nightmare into a work that transcends the genre to become a universal metaphor about power, violence, and the human condition. Apocalypse Now is not a movie. It is an experience that marks you forever. The ultimate journey into the heart of darkness, and one of the greatest films of all time. Now tell me, what is the greatest war movie you have ever seen? If you like, you can follow me on Instagram to chat for a while, or on Letterboxd to discover my favorite films. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss the next videos. See you very soon.